The moment you eat a banana, something quiet but powerful begins, not dramatic, not loud, just a simple choice that sets off a chain reaction inside your body. You don't feel it right away, but your body knows. It recognizes nourishment. It recognizes balance. It recognizes that you've given it something real instead of something empty. And that matters more than most people think. As soon as you take that first bite, enzymes in your saliva start breaking down carbohydrates. This isn't random. This is your body doing exactly what it was designed to do. The banana moves down and your digestive system gets to work, pulling apart what's useful and discarding what isn't. The natural sugars, glucose, fructose, sucrose enter your bloodstream slowly, not like a spike, not like a crash, but like a steady rise. This is energy that doesn't scream. It supports. It sustains. It keeps you moving forward when your motivation is low and your discipline is being tested. Potassium steps in quietly. You've heard about it, but you probably underestimate it. Potassium helps your muscles contract, your nerves communicate, your heart maintain rhythm. Every step you take, every breath you draw, every time your heart beats without you thinking about it, potassium is there, making sure the system doesn't fall apart. And the banana delivers it without asking for attention. Then there's fiber. Not exciting, not trendy, but essential. Fiber slows digestion, which means you stay full longer. You don't reach for distractions as quickly. You don't feel the urgent pull toward instant gratification. Your blood sugar stays stable, and stability is underrated. Stability is what allows consistency. Consistency is what builds anything meaningful, whether it's health, character, or a life you respect. Inside your gut, something deeper is happening. The fiber feeds the bacteria that live there, and those bacteria affect more than digestion. They influence mood. They influence clarity. They influence how resilient you feel when things don't go your way. When your gut is supported, your mind has a better chance of staying steady. And steadiness is a form of strength. Bananas also contain vitamin B6, which helps your brain create neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine. These aren't happiness buttons, they're regulators. They help you feel balanced instead of chaotic, focused instead of scattered. You don't suddenly become a different person after eating a banana, but you give your brain the raw materials it needs to function properly. And functioning properly is often the difference between reacting and responding, between giving up and pushing through. There's also magnesium working behind the scenes, helping your muscles relax, helping your nervous system calm down. Stress tightens the body. Chronic stress keeps it locked there. Small things, real food, simple habits help release that tension over time, not instantly, gradually. And gradual improvement is the only kind that lasts. What's interesting is how ordinary this all is. A banana isn't expensive. It isn't rare. It doesn't come with promises printed in bold letters. And yet it does exactly what it's supposed to do. It supports the system instead of overwhelming it. And there's a lesson in that. Most people look for transformation through extremes, drastic changes, loud declarations. But your body doesn't change that way. Your life doesn't change that way. It changes through small, repeatable decisions that respect how systems actually work. Eating a banana is not about the fruit. It's about choosing something that aligns with long-term function instead of short-term stimulation. You might not feel proud eating a banana. No one applauds, no one notices, but that's the point. Real progress is often invisible in the moment. It shows up later when you have more energy than you expected, when your focus lasts longer, when your mood doesn't swing as wildly, when your body doesn't fight you at every step. After you eat a banana, your body doesn't celebrate. It simply works better. And working better compounds. One stable blood sugar decision leads to another. One moment of nourishment makes the next decision easier. Over time, you start trusting yourself more because you're no longer constantly sabotaging the system you live in. This isn't about perfection, it's about alignment. When what you put into your body supports what you're trying to build in your life, friction decreases, resistance lowers. You don't need motivation all the time. You need fewer obstacles. The banana finishes its job quietly. The nutrients are absorbed. The waste moves on Nothing dramatic happens. And yet, your body is slightly more prepared for whatever comes next, slightly more capable, slightly more resilient. And those slight improvements, repeated daily, are how strength is actually built, how clarity accumulates, how discipline becomes less about force and more about identity, because you start becoming the kind of person who chooses what works, even when no one is watching. Most people underestimate the power of small choices because they are not dramatic, they don't announce themselves, they don't demand attention. But the body doesn't run on drama. It runs on systems, and systems respond to consistency, not intensity. When you eat something simple and real, like a banana, you're not just feeding hunger, you're sending a signal. You're telling your body that you're willing to work with it instead of constantly fighting against it. That signal matters because the body remembers patterns far more than isolated moments. A single choice really changes everything, but it always changes something. When natural sugars enter the bloodstream slowly instead of crashing in all at once, energy becomes usable rather than chaotic. That steadiness influences how you think, how you move, how you respond to pressure. You become slightly more patient, slightly more focused, slightly less reactive. These are not traits people chase directly, but they are the traits that quietly determine whether progress is sustainable or short-lived. Small choices reduce internal resistance. When the body is supported instead of shocked, it stops sending distress signals that demand attention. Cravings soften. Fatigue doesn't arrive as aggressively. Mental fog lifts just enough to make the next decision easier. This is how momentum actually begins, not with motivation, but with lowered friction. The easier it is to do the next right thing, the more likely you are to keep moving forward. People often believe they need a surge of willpower to change their lives, but willpower is unreliable when the system underneath is unstable. If blood sugar is swinging, if energy is unpredictable, if the nervous system is constantly overstimulated, discipline becomes a battle. Small nutritional choices stabilize the foundation so that discipline doesn't feel like punishment. It starts to feel like alignment. There's also something psychological happening when you choose simplicity over stimulation. You reinforce the idea that progress doesn't require chaos, that improvement doesn't need pain to be legitimate. Over time, this reshapes your self-image. You begin to see yourself as someone who makes decisions that serve the future rather than someone who constantly reacts to the present. That identity shift is subtle, but it's powerful. Consistency is not built by grand gestures. It is built by actions that are easy enough to repeat even on low energy days. A small choice that you can make when tired, distracted, or stressed is far more valuable than a perfect choice you can only make when everything feels aligned. When a behavior fits into real life, it survives. When it doesn't, it disappears. Each small decision also trains awareness. You begin to notice how your body responds when it's treated with respect. You feel the difference between steady energy and artificial stimulation. Once you experience that contrast enough times, your standards change. You no longer chase the spike because you understand the cost of the crash. This awareness becomes self-reinforcing, guiding future choices without force. Over time, these small actions compound. The body adapts, the mind calms, decision-making improves. What once required effort starts to feel natural. You don't become disciplined by pushing harder. You become disciplined by removing the things that constantly pull you off course. Small, intelligent choices quietly reshape the environment inside you. So progress feels less like resistance and more like direction. What begins as a simple act of nourishment becomes a pattern. That pattern becomes trust. And trust between you and your own system is the real foundation of lasting change. Stability is rarely celebrated because it doesn't look impressive from the outside. There is no rush, no spike, no visible struggle. But inside the body and mind, stability is what allows everything else to function. When blood sugar stays balanced, when digestion moves at its natural pace, when the nervous system isn't constantly pushed into alarm, the body stops wasting energy on damage control. That conserved energy becomes available for focus, movement, recovery, and thought. Without stability, strength becomes fragile. You might push hard for a while, but the system eventually collapses under its own stress. Rapid swings in energy lead to irritability, poor judgment, and impulsive decisions. This isn't a character flaw, it's biology. When the internal environment is chaotic, the mind mirrors that chaos. No amount of motivation can override a system that is constantly being destabilized. Stability creates space. When hunger isn't screaming, when energy isn't unpredictable, you gain mental room to think instead of react. This is where discipline begins, not as force, but as clarity. Clear systems make clear decisions possible. When the body feels supported, the mind is less defensive. You don't need to constantly negotiate with yourself just to do basic tasks. The gut plays a larger role in this than most people realize. When digestion is supported and gut bacteria are fed properly, signals sent to the brain change, inflammation lowers, mood becomes more even, anxiety loses some of its intensity. You're not suddenly fearless, but you're less shaken by small disruptions. Emotional regulation becomes easier because the body isn't adding unnecessary stress to the equation. Stability also trains patience. When your energy arrives steadily instead of in bursts, you stop rushing. You stop needing everything immediately. That shift affects how you work, how you listen, how you respond to challenges. Patience is often mistaken for passivity, but in reality, it's controlled strength. It's the ability to remain engaged without burning out. Discipline depends on this kind of internal order. If your body is constantly asking for quick relief, sugar spikes, caffeine hits, stimulation, discipline feels like deprivation. But when the system is balanced, discipline feels like preference. You're no longer resisting temptation with clenched teeth. You're choosing what keeps you steady because you've experienced the alternative. Stability also protects consistency. Progress doesn't come from doing something perfectly once. It comes from doing it imperfectly many times. A stable internal environment allows for mistakes without collapse. You can miss a day and return the next without guilt or exhaustion. That resilience is only possible when the foundation isn't brittle. Over time, this stability reshapes how you define strength. Strength stops being about intensity and starts being about reliability. Can you show up again tomorrow? Can you think clearly under pressure? Can you recover instead of breaking down? These are not dramatic victories, but they determine long-term outcomes far more than short-lived bursts of effort. When stability becomes the norm, discipline stops being an act of resistance and becomes an expression of identity. You act in alignment because chaos no longer feels familiar or comfortable. The body and mind work together instead of pulling in opposite directions. That cooperation is what allows sustained effort, steady growth, and progress that doesn't demand constant. Repair quiet habits compound in ways most people never notice because they are invisible in the moment. Eating a banana, choosing water over soda, walking instead of scrolling, these are small, almost imperceptible acts. They don't produce fireworks. They don't deliver instant validation. And yet, each one slightly alters the system you live in, gradually shifting energy, mood, and focus. This is the principle behind lasting progress, the accumulation of small, aligned decisions that add up over time, often without anyone realizing it. Compounding works because each action influences the next. When you fuel your body properly, your energy stabilizes, your attention sharpens, and your decisions become clearer. You're less likely to overeat, overreact, or procrastinate. That clarity allows the next right choice to be easier. When the next choice is easier, the one after that becomes almost automatic. What begins as a small, almost trivial act becomes the foundation for increasingly significant behaviors. One banana does not transform your life, but the decision to eat a banana when you are tired, stressed, or distracted strengthens a pattern that compounds into resilience. Most people underestimate the power of repetition because they expect visible results immediately. But progress is rarely visible in real time. It shows up as more energy, more patience, a clearer mind, and the ability to endure discomfort without collapse. These results are subtle, almost silent, but they accumulate faster than chaotic, sporadic efforts. Quiet habits are like the roots of a tree. They grow unseen, but hold everything steady above the surface. With that strong roots, even the most spectacular growth cannot survive a storm. The compounding effect is also psychological. Each small, successful choice reinforces your belief in your ability to act wisely. Over time, you begin to trust yourself. Trust is critical because without it, every decision feels like a battle. You second guess, resist, or delay. When you act in alignment with what actually supports you, you begin to see that you are capable of consistency. You are capable of long-term thinking. You are capable of becoming the person who can handle complexity without falling apart. Compounding habits are self-reinforcing because they create momentum. Momentum is what separates fleeting motivation from sustainable progress. Motivation is unreliable, it comes and goes, but momentum, once established, carries you forward. Quiet, repeated actions establish that momentum. They shift the baseline of your capabilities so that effort feels lighter. Challenges feel less threatening and endurance feels natural. You are no longer struggling against yourself because the internal system you operate within has become slightly more stable, slightly more reliable, slightly more prepared for the next challenge. This compounding doesn't only affect your body, it affects your identity. As your habits accumulate, you stop thinking in terms of single actions, you start thinking in terms of patterns. You start identifying as someone who makes choices that support growth, rather than someone who reacts to impulses or external pressure. Your identity begins to align with your actions, and when identity and action are consistent, progress becomes inevitable. You don't rely on motivation or force, you rely on the system you've built and the person you've become through repeated small choices. Quiet habits also teach patience and perspective. You learn to tolerate the lack of immediate reward, because you understand that lasting change does not occur in a moment. You learn that compounding is exponential, not linear. Each small effort may seem insignificant alone, but over time, the sum becomes far greater than you imagined. This understanding changes how you approach decisions, challenges, and setbacks. You no longer demand instant results because you have experienced how small, consistent actions naturally accumulate into something substantial, reliable, and transformative. Through quiet, compounding habits, life itself becomes a system of alignment. You reduce friction, stabilize energy, and strengthen resilience, all without relying on dramatic measures. The effects are subtle but cumulative, building a foundation that can support far greater challenges, achievements, and growth than any isolated, short-lived effort ever could. When you step back and look at the journey, you realize that transformation is rarely the result of grand gestures or dramatic leaps. It is the accumulation of small, aligned choices, the quiet decisions you make when no one is watching, that create lasting change. Eating a banana is not just nourishment. It is a metaphor for how consistent simple actions shape your energy, your focus, and your identity over time. Stability, patience, and clarity emerge not from extremes, but from repeated acts that honor the system you live in. Progress is quiet, incremental, and often invisible in the moment, but it compounds relentlessly, building resilience, strength, and trust in yourself. What matters most is that you choose to act in alignment with long-term function rather than short-term impulse, that you respect the quiet power of small habits, and that you allow these choices to shape the person you are becoming. Real change is not a single event, it is a living process, a daily commitment to consistency, awareness, and alignment. When you embrace this principle, you begin to see that every small decision, no matter how ordinary, carries the potential to shift your life profoundly. Every bite, every choice, every moment of intentional action counts more than you think, and over time, these small acts build a life that is stronger, clearer, and more capable than you ever imagined.